I stood outside the church doors in my best suit, holding the bouquet I'd spent 3 hours picking out that morning, when my daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, you're not walking me down the aisle. Tom's father is doing it. You can sit in the back." 72 years on this earth, and I'd never felt so small. But what happened 3 hours later at the reception, when my daughter-in-law Sarah pulled me aside with tears streaming down her face and whispered, "Mr. Patterson, there's something about Emily you need to know. Something she's been hiding from everyone, including you. Changed everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. That secret didn't just explain why she rejected me that day. It exposed a truth so devastating, it would either destroy our family forever or finally set us free." Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. Let me back up 6 months before that wedding day, to when Emily first told me she was getting engaged. I was in my workshop, restoring an old rocking chair I'd found at a garage sale, when she called. Her voice had that edge to it, that distance I'd been hearing for the past 2 years, but kept telling myself was just her being busy with her career. "Dad, I have news. Mark proposed. We're getting married in June." No excitement, no joy, just facts delivered like she was reading a grocery list. I should have heard the warning bells right then, but I was so thrilled she was calling me at all that I pushed down the unease and congratulated her with everything I had. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your mother would be so happy." The silence on the other end lasted too long. "Yeah, listen, I have to go. I'll send you the details later." Click. That was it. 3 minutes, and she was gone again. My wife, Margaret, died 8 years ago from cancer. Emily was 26 then, and something broke inside her when we lost Margaret. I understood that. Hell, something broke inside me too. But while I tried to keep us connected, Emily pulled away. First, it was missing Sunday dinners. Then it was canceling our monthly fishing trips, the ones we'd done since she was 7 years old. Eventually, it became texts instead of calls, then just birthday cards with her signature and nothing else. I told myself it was grief, that she needed space to process losing her mother, that one day she'd come back to me. But 2 years turned into 4, then 6, then 8, and now here she was, getting married, and I hadn't even met the groom. I'd seen him in photos on Facebook. Mark something, worked in finance, had that polished look that suggested money and ambition. But Emily had never brought him to meet me, never invited me to dinner with them, never once said, "Dad, there's someone I want you to meet." The wedding invitation arrived 3 weeks later. Formal, expensive, with gold lettering that probably cost more than my monthly pension. The ceremony would be at St. Catherine's Church, the same place where Margaret and I got married 45 years ago. The reception at the Grandview Country Club, black tie optional, and at the bottom, in smaller print, limited seating available. I read that line 5 times, trying to figure out if it meant what I thought it meant. I called Emily the next day. "Honey, I got the invitation. It's beautiful. I was thinking, for the father-daughter dance, maybe we could do that song your mom loved, the one by—" She cut me off. "Dad, we're not doing a father-daughter dance. Mark's father is giving a speech instead. We're keeping things streamlined." Streamlined. Like I was some unnecessary detail that cluttered up her perfect wedding. But I swallowed it. I swallowed all of it because she was my daughter, my only child, and I would have walked through fire just to be part of her life again. I asked if I could help with anything. She said no. I asked if she needed money for the wedding. She said Mark's parents were covering everything. I asked if I could at least take her and Mark out to dinner before the wedding. "We're really busy, Dad. I'll see you at the church." The weeks that followed were torture. I bought a new suit, navy blue, spent more than I should have, but I wanted to look good for her. I practiced what I'd say when I saw her, how I'd tell her how beautiful she looked. How proud I was of the woman she'd become. How much her mother would have loved to see this day. I even wrote it down on index cards and rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror like some kind of desperate fool. My neighbor Tom, good man, tried to prepare me for disappointment. We were sitting on his porch drinking beer 2 weeks before the wedding when he said, "Jim, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but from what you've told me, it sounds like Emily's trying to keep you at arm's length. Have you thought about why?" I had thought about it every damn day, but I couldn't find an answer that made sense. I went through every memory I had, every moment from her childhood. Had I been a bad father? I'd coached her soccer team until she was 12. I'd helped with her homework every night. I'd been at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every graduation. When Margaret got sick, I worked double shifts at the plant to pay for the medical bills while still making sure Emily had everything she needed for college. Where had I failed her? The day before the wedding, Emily's childhood best friend Sarah called me. Sarah had married my nephew David 3 years ago, making her technically my niece-in-law. She'd always been kind to me, always made a point to check in after Margaret died. "Uncle Jim," she said, her voice careful, "I'm in the wedding party tomorrow. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the seating arrangement is, well, just prepare yourself, okay? And if you need anything during the reception, come find me." That phone call kept me up all night. What did she mean by prepare yourself? What was I walking into? But I pushed it down. I had to. Because she was my daughter, and this was her wedding day, and I was going to be there no matter what. I was going to show her that I loved her unconditionally, that nothing she did could push me away completely, that I would always be her father. I arrived at the church 2 hours early. I wanted to see if I could help with setup, or at least see Emily before the ceremony. But the wedding planner, a stern woman with a clipboard, stopped me at the door. "Name?" she asked. "Jim Patterson. I'm the bride's father." She checked her list, frowned, then checked again. "You're not on the early arrival list. Immediate family only until 11. I looked at her, confused. I am immediate family. I'm her father. She made a phone call, spoke quietly, then hung up and said, "I'm sorry, sir. The bride has requested that you wait in the parking lot until the ceremony begins. You can enter at 11:45. The bride has requested." My own daughter had told them to keep me in the parking lot like some unwanted guest. I stood there on those church steps, the same steps where I'd carried her as a baby for her baptism, and felt something crack inside my chest. I waited in my truck for 2 hours. I watched the guests arrive. Mark's family, dozens of them, all dressed in designer clothes, laughing and hugging. Emily's college friends, people I'd never met, her co-workers. Distant cousins I hadn't seen in years, but who apparently made the cut when I didn't. And then I saw him, Emily's boss from her first job out of college, Robert something. I'd met him once at her graduation party. Seemed like an okay guy. He walked in with his wife, carrying a massive gift, and the wedding planner greeted him like royalty. At 11:45, I got out of my truck, straightened my tie, picked up the bouquet I'd brought for Emily, a tradition Margaret had told me about years ago, and walked toward the church entrance. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry, but I kept my head high because I was her father, and I deserved to be there. The wedding planner let me in without a word. The church was packed, every pew filled except for a few seats in the very back corner. That's where she pointed me, the back corner, behind people I'd never met. Behind the video camera operator, behind the musicians. I sat down and looked around. The church was beautiful. White roses everywhere, the kind Margaret had loved, candles lighting up the altar, a string quartet playing something classical. Emily had taste, I'll give her that. She'd gotten that from her mother. Then I saw Sarah, my niece-in-law, in the front with the other bridesmaids. She caught my eye, and her face fell. She mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry," and I nodded, because what else could I do? The music changed. Everyone stood, and there she was, my daughter, my Emily, walking down the aisle in a white dress that made her look like an angel, just like her mother had looked on our wedding day, and on her arm, holding her close, walking her toward her future, was Mark's father, a man I'd never met, a man who hadn't changed her diapers, or taught her to ride a bike, or held her when she cried about boys breaking her heart. He got to walk her down the aisle. He got the honor that should have been mine. I felt the tears before I could stop them, hot and humiliating, rolling down my cheeks while everyone watched this perfect moment. Emily didn't look at me, not once. She stared straight ahead at Mark, smiling that radiant smile I hadn't seen in years, and it was like I didn't exist, like I was invisible, like I was nothing. The ceremony was torture. Every moment, every word, was a reminder that I'd been erased from my daughter's life. The minister talked about the bonds of family, about parents giving their blessing, and I wanted to scream that I'd never been asked for my blessing, that I'd been shut out of every decision. When they did the unity candle ceremony, Mark's parents lit the candles with them. Not me, never me. And then it was over. Husband and wife. The church erupted in applause. Emily and Mark kissed, turned to face the congregation, and walked back down the aisle together. She passed right by me, so close I could have reached out and touched her dress. She looked at the people in the front rows, waving, smiling, glowing. She looked at Mark's parents, at her friends, at her bridesmaids, but not at me, not once at me. I thought about leaving, just getting in my truck and driving home and trying to forget this whole nightmare. But Sarah found me in the parking lot before I could escape. "Uncle Jim, please don't go. I need to talk to you after the reception. It's important, about Emily. There are things you don't know." Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "What things?" I asked. "Not here, not now. But I promise you, after the reception, everything will make sense. Just, please stay." So I stayed. I drove to the country club, parked in the back, and walked into a reception that looked like it cost more than my annual income. Crystal chandeliers, a live band, tables decorated with more flowers than I'd seen outside a funeral home, open bar with top-shelf liquor. And in the center of it all, the happy couple, surrounded by people who actually mattered to them. I found my assigned seat, table 16. The last table in the back corner by the kitchen doors. I was sitting with people I'd never met. Mark's distant relatives from out of state, who introduced themselves politely, but clearly had no idea who I was. When I said I was Emily's father, they looked confused, like they'd been told she didn't have a father. Maybe she'd told them that. Maybe in her version of her life story, I was already dead and buried, next to Margaret. The speeches started. Mark's father stood up and talked about love and commitment, and how proud he was to welcome Emily into their family. The crowd laughed at his jokes and awed at his sentimental moments. Then Mark's mother spoke about the first time she met Emily, how she knew immediately that this girl was perfect for her son. The bridesmaids shared funny stories. The best man told embarrassing tales about Mark's bachelor party. Everyone laughed and cheered and celebrated. Nobody asked me to speak. Nobody even acknowledged I was there. When the father-daughter dance was announced, Mark's father took Emily's hand and led her to the dance floor while everyone watched and clapped. I sat at table 16, watching another man dance with my daughter, and felt something inside me finally break completely. Not crack, not bend, break. Into pieces so small, I didn't know if they could ever be put back together. I was getting ready to leave, to hell with whatever Sarah wanted to tell me, when she appeared at my table. Her mascara was smudged, her hands were shaking. She leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Uncle Jim, we need to talk. Now. Outside. Please." The desperation in her voice stopped me. I followed her out to the country club terrace, away from the music and laughter and celebration of my daughter's new life without me. Sarah looked around to make sure we were alone, then grabbed both my hands. "Uncle Jim, I've been keeping a secret for Emily for 2 years. She made me promise not to tell you. But after watching what she did to you today, I can't stay silent anymore. You deserve to know the truth." My heart was pounding. "What truth? Sarah, what are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Uncle Jim, Emily blames you for your wife's death. She believes that if you'd caught the cancer sooner, if you'd made Margaret go to the doctor earlier, she'd still be alive today. And she's been punishing you for it ever since Margaret died. Everything, the distance, the rejection, today, all of it, is because she holds you responsible for losing her mother." The ground disappeared beneath my feet. 8 years of questions suddenly had an answer, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. I couldn't breathe. The words Sarah had just spoken were circling in my head like vultures. Emily blamed me for Margaret's death. For 8 years, while I'd been drowning in guilt and grief and loneliness, my daughter had been nursing a hatred so deep she'd erased me from her life. "Sarah," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper, "what are you talking about?" Margaret had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, the doctors said, "I know what the doctors said, Uncle Jim." Sarah was crying harder now. "But Emily doesn't believe them. She thinks if you'd paid more attention, if you'd insisted Margaret see a doctor when she first started losing weight, they could have caught it earlier. She's convinced herself that you were too busy with work, too distracted, too careless, and she can't forgive you for it." The memory hit me like a freight train. Margaret had been losing weight for months before the diagnosis. She'd said it was stress from her job, that she was fine. I'd believed her because I'd wanted to believe her, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. But I had noticed. Of course I'd noticed. I'd begged her to see a doctor. She'd refused, said she didn't have time, that it was nothing. When she finally went, when they found the tumor, it was already too late. "Sarah, I tried. I tried so hard to get her to go sooner. But your Aunt Margaret was stubborn. She didn't want to worry Emily. She didn't want to be a burden." My voice cracked. "Does Emily really think I wouldn't have done everything in my power to save her mother, the woman I loved for 45 years? Sarah squeezed my hands tighter. "I've tried to tell her that, Uncle Jim, so many times, but she won't listen." After Margaret died, Emily found some old calendar where Margaret had written notes about not feeling well months before the diagnosis. Emily became obsessed with it. She calculated that if you'd pushed harder, if you'd made Margaret go to the doctor even 2 months earlier, the cancer might have been treatable. And she convinced herself that those 2 months are on you. I pulled my hands away and gripped the terrace railing. Below us, the country club's garden stretched out, perfectly manicured, beautiful. Everything here was perfect. Everything except me. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you let me suffer for 8 years wondering what I'd done wrong?" "Because she made me promise." Sarah's voice was desperate. "She said if I told you, she'd cut me out of her life completely. And I thought, I hoped, that time would heal her, that she'd eventually see reason. But it's only gotten worse, especially after she met Mark. His family is so different from ours. They have money, status, connections. And I think being with them made her want to forget everything about her old life, including you." The pieces were falling into place. The rejection wasn't just about Margaret. It was about Emily wanting to become someone new, someone who didn't come from a middle-class family in a small house, with a father who worked at a plant for 40 years, someone who belonged with people like Mark's family, and I was the anchor dragging her back to a past she wanted to erase. "Does Mark know?" I asked. "Does he know she blames me for her mother's death?" Sarah nodded. "He knows Emily's version of the story, that you were negligent, that you let Margaret die. I don't think he knows your side. I don't think Emily ever told him how hard you tried, how much you sacrificed to pay for the treatments, how you held Margaret's hand every single day in the hospital until she took her last breath." I remembered those hospital days. 3 months of watching the woman I loved waste away. 3 months of reading to her, playing her favorite music, telling her stories about our life together. 3 months of praying for a miracle that never came. And Emily had been there too. She'd seen it all. How had she twisted those memories into something that made me the villain? There's more, Uncle Jim. Sarah's voice dropped even lower. Emily's been in therapy for the past year. Her therapist apparently encouraged her to set boundaries with toxic family members. That's the term she uses. She thinks you're toxic because you remind her of her mother's death. And Mark's family has been reinforcing that narrative. They've been telling her it's healthy to cut ties with people who cause her pain. Toxic. My daughter thought I was toxic. The man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd worked himself to exhaustion to keep the house she grew up in, who'd loved her with every fiber of his being. I was toxic. So today, I said slowly, the wedding, keeping me in the back, having Mark's father walk her down the aisle, all of it was intentional. It wasn't carelessness or oversight. She planned it. She wanted me to feel exactly this way. I think so. Sarah wiped her eyes. I confronted her about it last week. I told her what she was doing was cruel. She said you deserved it, that you took her mother from her, so she's taking her life from you. An eye for an eye. I know this is hard to hear. Believe me, it was hard to live through. But if you're still watching, drop a comment telling me if you think Emily was right to blame me. I need to know. I really need to know. The music from inside the reception swelled. They were playing something upbeat, something that made everyone laugh. My daughter was in there, celebrating the happiest day of her life, while I stood out here learning that she'd spent 8 years hating me for something I couldn't control, something I'd tried to prevent, something that had destroyed me just as much as it had destroyed her. What do I do, Sarah? How do I fix this? I felt like I was drowning. Do I go in there? Do I confront her? Do I tell her the truth about what really happened with her mother? Sarah shook her head. Not tonight. She's not ready to hear it. And honestly, Uncle Jim, I don't know if she ever will be. Some people need someone to blame when they lose someone they love. And you were the easiest target. But I'm her father. I know. But right now, in her mind, Mark's father is filling that role. He's the father who didn't fail her, who didn't let her mother die, who represents everything she thinks she deserves. I looked through the glass doors at the reception. I could see Emily on the dance floor, laughing with Mark, looking happier than I'd seen her in years. She'd built a new life, a new family, and there was no room in it for me. Maybe there never would be. Sarah, why are you telling me this now? What changed? She took a shaky breath. Because I'm pregnant. David and I found out last week, and watching Emily treat you this way made me realize that I never want to be the kind of mother who turns my child against the people who love them. I never want to teach my baby that it's okay to punish someone for being human, for not being perfect, for not being able to prevent the unpreventable. I pulled Sarah into a hug. She sobbed against my shoulder, and I realized she'd been carrying this secret for years. It had been eating at her, just like it had been eating at me. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for telling me. Even if it changes nothing, at least now I know. We stood there for a few minutes, two people mourning the family that could have been. Then Sarah pulled back and said, "There's something else you should know. Mark's family is very wealthy. His father owns a chain of investment firms. They've already started talking about having children right away. And Mark's mother keeps saying how excited she is to be a grandmother. I think Emily's trying to build the perfect family with them. The family she thinks she should have had. Perfect. That word again. Emily was chasing perfection in a world that would never give it to her. But she was my daughter, and I knew her better than anyone. I knew that underneath all this anger and blame, there was still a little girl who'd once thought her daddy could fix anything. A little girl who'd held my hand during thunderstorms and believed I'd protect her from anything. I need to see the calendar, I said suddenly. The one Margaret wrote in. The one Emily's been using as evidence against me. Sarah looked surprised. Why? Because if I'm going to lose my daughter over this, I need to know exactly what I'm losing her over. I need to see what Emily sees. It's at her apartment. I don't know if I can… Sarah, please. You've already broken one promise to her by telling me the truth. Break one more. Let me see that calendar. Let me understand what's in her head. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but not tonight. Tomorrow. I'll get David to help. Emily and Mark are going on their honeymoon for 2 weeks. I have a key to their apartment to water the plants. We can go there tomorrow afternoon. I nodded. It wasn't much, but it was something. A chance to see the evidence my daughter had used to convict me in her mind. A chance to understand the distortion that had cost me 8 years with the person I loved most in the world. Uncle Jim, Sarah said as we walked back toward the reception entrance, I want you to know something. You were a good father. You are a good father. What happened to Aunt Margaret wasn't your fault, and what Emily's doing now isn't your fault either. Sometimes people we love hurt us in ways we don't deserve, but that doesn't mean we stop being who we are. I tried to smile, but couldn't quite manage it. I should go. I don't belong here. Wait! Sarah grabbed my arm. Before you leave, there's one more thing. David and I are going to talk to Emily when she gets back from her honeymoon. We're going to tell her that we can't support the way she's treating you anymore. That if she wants us in her life, she needs to at least be willing to hear the truth about what happened with Margaret. I can't promise it'll change anything, but we have to try. It was more than I'd had 5 minutes ago. More than I'd had in 8 years. Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations on the baby. You're going to be an amazing mother. I walked back through the reception hall one last time. I didn't look at Emily. I didn't try to say goodbye. I just walked past the tables full of happy people, past the band playing love songs, past the life my daughter had built without me, and out into the parking lot where my truck waited. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the route I took or how long it took. I just remember sitting in my driveway at 1 in the morning, staring at the dark house, the house where Emily had grown up, where Margaret and I had raised her with so much love, and wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Inside, everything looked the same. Margaret's reading chair in the corner, Emily's baby photos on the mantel, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of family dinners. But it all felt empty now, like a museum of a life that had died right along with Margaret. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet. On the top shelf, in a box I hadn't touched in 8 years, were Margaret's things. Her favorite sweater, her jewelry, her books, and buried at the bottom, her planner from the year she died. I took it out with shaking hands and sat on the bed. The entries started in January. Feeling tired, probably just the winter blues. February. Lost 5 pounds without trying. Must be the new diet working. March. Jim noticed I'm not eating much. Told him I'm fine. Don't want to worry E with doctor visits before her finals. April. Sharp pain in abdomen. Probably just stress. We'll schedule checkup after E's graduation. I read every entry, every dismissal of symptoms, every reassurance she'd written to herself that it was nothing, that she was fine, that she didn't need to bother with doctors. And yes, there were a few entries where she mentioned that I'd suggested she see someone. Jim nagging again about doctor. I'll go next month. But next month never came, because the pain got worse, and by the time she finally went, it was already stage 4. This was the calendar Emily had read. This was her evidence. But she'd read it through the lens of grief and anger, and she'd seen what she wanted to see. Proof that I hadn't done enough. She'd ignored every entry where Margaret had actively refused help. Every entry where she'd made the choice to wait, to hope, to believe it was nothing. I sat there holding that planner, and for the first time in 8 years, I let myself be angry at Margaret. Angry that she'd been so stubborn. Angry that she'd hidden her pain. Angry that she'd left me to face Emily's blame alone. And then I felt guilty for being angry, because Margaret was dead and Emily was alive, and I was the one left behind to carry all of it. Looking back now, I wonder if things would have been different if I'd found that planner years ago, if I'd shown it to Emily right after the funeral. But I was drowning in my own grief, and I never thought my daughter would blame me. I never imagined she could hate me for losing the woman we both loved. The next afternoon, Sarah and David picked me up. We drove to Emily's apartment in silence. It was in a new luxury building downtown, the kind of place I could never afford. Sarah used her key to let us in, and I stepped into my daughter's new life. Everything was modern, expensive, tasteful. White furniture, abstract art on the walls, a view of the city skyline. There was nothing of her childhood here. No family photos, no mementos from the house she grew up in. It was like she'd erased every trace of where she came from. "The calendar's in her office," Sarah said quietly, leading me down a hallway. The office was smaller than the other rooms, but just as polished. A glass desk, an expensive computer, bookshelves lined with business books and self-help titles. And on one of those shelves, in a frame like it was some kind of sacred artifact, was Margaret's calendar, open to April, the month before her diagnosis. I took it down with trembling hands. Sarah had been right. Emily had highlighted certain passages in yellow. Jim noticed I'm not eating much. Jim suggested I see Dr. Morrison. Told Jim I'm fine, but she'd also added her own notes in the margins in red pen. He should have insisted. He should have known. He let her die. 3 sentences in red ink that had defined 8 years of my life. 3 sentences that had turned me from a father into a villain. I stood there reading those words over and over, and something inside me shifted. Not broke, not cracked, but hardened. Because I'd done everything I could. I'd begged Margaret to see a doctor. I'd made appointments she'd canceled. I'd researched her symptoms online and printed out articles about pancreatic cancer warning signs that she'd thrown away. I'd done everything except physically drag her to the hospital, and even then, it probably would have been too late. Emily had chosen to believe a lie, and that lie had cost us both everything. "Uncle Jim?" David's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I will be. Can I take a photo of this? I want to have proof of what she's been telling herself." Sarah nodded. I took several photos with my phone, making sure to capture Emily's red annotations. Then I carefully put the calendar back exactly where it had been and walked out of that apartment, out of that building, out of that version of my daughter's life where I was the enemy. On the drive home, I made a decision. I was done chasing Emily, done trying to prove my innocence, done begging for scraps of her attention. If she wanted to believe I was responsible for Margaret's death, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life punishing myself for failing to save a woman who hadn't wanted to be saved. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked as they dropped me off. "I'm going to live," I said. "For the first time in 8 years, I'm going to actually live my life instead of mourning the relationship I lost with Emily." But the universe wasn't done with me yet, because 3 days later, I got a phone call that changed everything again. It was from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Mr. Patterson, this is Dr. Chen from Portland Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter Emily. There's been an accident on her honeymoon. You need to come to the hospital right away." My hands went numb. My daughter, the one who'd spent 8 years hating me, the one who'd erased me from her life, needed me. And despite everything, I grabbed my keys and ran for the door. The 2-hour drive to Portland was the longest of my life. Dr. Chen had been vague on the phone, saying only that there'd been a car accident on the way to the airport, and that Emily was in surgery. Mark had minor injuries. Emily's condition was critical. I drove with my hazard lights on the whole way, doing 80 in a 65 zone, praying to Margaret that I wouldn't lose our daughter the same way I'd lost her. When I got to the hospital, Mark's parents were already there. His father saw me coming down the hallway and stood up, blocking my path like I was some kind of threat. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Emily wouldn't want you here." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm her father. I'm staying." For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't asking permission to be part of my daughter's life. Mark's mother tried a softer approach. "Mr. Patterson, perhaps it would be best if you waited somewhere else. This is a very stressful time for our family, and Emily's wishes should be respected." Our family. Like Emily had been born into their clan instead of mine. I ignored her and walked past them to the nurse's station, asked for Emily's room number, and was told she was still in surgery and would be for several more hours. I sat down in the waiting room as far from Mark's parents as I could get. Mark appeared 20 minutes later, his arm in a sling, a bandage on his forehead, looking shell-shocked. He saw me and froze. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He looked like a scared kid who'd just realized the world wasn't as safe as he'd thought. "I'm her father," I repeated. "I'm staying until I know she's okay." Mark opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He sat down with his parents, and they whispered furiously, occasionally glancing at me like I was a bomb that might explode at any moment. Let them whisper. I'd spent 8 years being erased, and I was done being invisible. Sarah and David arrived an hour later. Sarah hugged me hard, crying into my shoulder. I called as soon as I heard. "How is she?" I shook my head because I didn't know, because no one would tell me anything, because I was just the toxic father who'd let her mother die. But Sarah marched right up to the nurse's station, told them she was Emily's cousin, and somehow got information I couldn't. "She has internal bleeding and a collapsed lung," Sarah reported back, her voice shaking. "They're working on her now. The doctor said the next few hours are critical." I felt my legs go weak. David caught my arm and helped me sit down. This couldn't be happening. Not again. I couldn't lose my daughter the same way I'd lost my wife. The hours crawled by. Mark's parents brought coffee and sandwiches for Mark, but offered me nothing. Fine. I'd survived on less. Sarah sat with me, holding my hand, while David kept making phone calls to update other family members. Mark paced the hallway, looking more lost with every passing minute, and I realized that for all his money and polish, he'd never faced real tragedy before. At midnight, Dr. Chen finally emerged from the surgical wing. We all stood at once. "The surgery was successful," she said, and I felt my knees buckle with relief. "But Emily's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will tell us if there's been any brain damage from oxygen deprivation. She's sedated now and won't wake up until tomorrow at the earliest." "Can we see her?" Mark's father asked immediately. Dr. Chen looked at her clipboard. "Immediate family only. 2 at a time, 5 minutes maximum." Mark's father started to move forward, then stopped when Dr. Chen added, "That means parents and spouse." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Patterson, you and your daughter's husband can go in first." The look on Mark's father's face was priceless. For once, being the biological parent meant something. Mark and I walked down the hallway together in awkward silence. In the elevator, he finally spoke. "I didn't know about what Emily did at the wedding. My parents planned most of it. I thought you'd chosen to sit in the back." His voice was quiet, ashamed. "Did you know she blames me for her mother's death?" I asked. Mark nodded. "She told me you were negligent, that you didn't care enough to get her mother help in time. But seeing you here, seeing how fast you came when she needed you, I'm starting to think there's more to the story than she told me." We reached Emily's room. She looked so small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, breathing through a tube, bandages covering half her face. She looked like she had when she was 5 years old and got pneumonia, when I'd sat by her bed for 3 days straight, reading her stories and holding her hand until the fever broke. My little girl, my baby. I took her hand, careful of the IV, and leaned close to her ear. "Emily, it's Dad. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You're going to be okay." Mark stood on the other side of the bed, crying silently, and I realized he genuinely loved her. Whatever else was wrong with their relationship, he loved my daughter. And right now, that was enough. The 5 minutes ended too quickly. A nurse came to usher us out, but I squeezed Emily's hand one more time. "Fight, baby girl. Fight like your mother did. Don't you dare leave me." As we left, I could have sworn I felt her fingers twitch, but maybe that was just wishful thinking, just a desperate father seeing what he wanted to see. Mark's parents went in next, then Sarah and David. Then the cycle started over. All through the night, we took turns sitting with Emily, 5 minutes at a time, while she slept her medicated sleep, and we prayed she'd wake up as herself. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in that uncomfortable chair, watching the door to her room, waiting. Dawn broke gray and cold. Dr. Chen returned at 7 in the morning to check on Emily. "Her vitals are stabilizing," she reported. "We're going to start reducing the sedation in an hour. If all goes well, she should wake up sometime this afternoon." I felt tears stream down my face. My daughter was going to live. The rest we could figure out later. Sarah brought me coffee and a muffin from the cafeteria. "You need to eat, Uncle Jim. You're no good to Emily if you collapse." I forced down half the muffin just to make her happy. Mark was sleeping in a chair across from me, his head thrown back, snoring softly. His parents had gone to a hotel to shower and change. For the moment, it was just us, the people who actually loved Emily. At noon, the nurse came out and said Emily was starting to respond to stimuli. She squeezed the doctor's hand, and her eyes are moving under her lids. "It won't be long now." My heart was racing. What would Emily say when she woke up? Would she tell me to leave? Would she refuse to see me? Or had this brush with death changed something in her? Mark woke up, and we went in together again. This time, Emily's eyes were fluttering. Her fingers were moving. The nurse said to talk to her, that familiar voices would help her wake up. Mark went first. Baby, it's me. It's Mark. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay. I love you. Come back to me." I stepped closer, my voice cracking. "Emmy, it's Dad. You're safe. I'm here. I'll always be here." And then her eyes opened, unfocused at first, confused, darting around the room. They landed on Mark and she tried to smile. Then they found me, and something in her expression changed. Not anger, not hatred, something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "Dad?" Her voice was barely a whisper through the breathing tube. The nurse said she'd remove it in a minute, that Emily needed to stay calm. But Emily's eyes were locked on mine, and tears were streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The words were mumbled, unclear, but I heard them. After 8 years of silence and blame, I heard them. The nurse removed the breathing tube. Emily coughed, gasped, and I wanted to rush to her but forced myself to stay back. "Don't try to talk," the nurse said. "Just rest." But Emily shook her head weakly. "Dad, please, I need to tell you something before I lose my nerve again. I need you to know." Mark stepped back, giving us space. The nurse checked the monitors, frowned, but didn't stop Emily from talking. "When I was in the car," Emily whispered, her voice raw and broken. "When it started flipping, all I could think about was you. Not Mark, not his parents. You. I kept thinking that if I died, the last thing I did was hurt you at my wedding. And I couldn't die like that. Emmy, stop. Don't talk. You need to rest." I was crying now, unable to hold it back. 8 years of pain were pouring out of me, and I couldn't control it anymore. But she reached for my hand with surprising strength and held on tight. "I blamed you, because it was easier than accepting that Mom made her own choices," she continued, her words coming faster now, desperate. "It was easier than accepting that sometimes people die, and it's nobody's fault. I wanted someone to be responsible, someone to punish. And you were there, and you loved me, so I knew you'd take it. I knew you'd let me hurt you because you always put me first." The machines beeped faster. The nurse said we needed to let Emily rest, that this conversation could wait. But Emily wasn't done. I saw the calendar, Dad. I saw Mom's words. I saw that she refused help, that she lied to you about feeling fine, that she was just as stubborn as I am. But I convinced myself it didn't matter, that you should have forced her. Because admitting the truth meant admitting I wasted 8 years hating you for nothing. You didn't waste anything, I said, stroking her hair like I'd done when she was little. We still have time. We can fix this. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Could 8 years of hatred be undone? Could we really go back to being father and daughter after everything that had happened? Mark's family, Emily said, looking at her husband with something like shame. They made it worse. They kept telling me I was right to cut you out, that toxic people should be eliminated from your life. And I liked hearing it because it justified what I was already doing. But Dad, you were never toxic. You were just human. And I punished you for being human. Mark spoke for the first time. Emily, you never told me any of this. You said your father was negligent. You said he didn't care about your mother. His voice was hurt, confused. Why did you lie to me? Emily closed her eyes, more tears falling. Because if I told you the truth, I'd have to admit I was wrong. And I wasn't ready to admit that. The nurse insisted we leave. Emily needed to rest, to heal. But as I turned to go, Emily called out, Dad, wait, please don't leave. Not yet. I've spent 8 years pushing you away. I need you to stay now. I need to know you're still here. I looked at the nurse, who sighed and nodded. 5 more minutes. I sat in the chair next to Emily's bed and held her hand. We didn't talk. We just sat there, father and daughter, together for the first time in 8 years. Mark stood by the door, watching us, and I saw him wipe away tears. Whatever happened next, whatever Emily decided when she was fully recovered, at least we'd had this moment. At least she'd finally told me the truth. When the 5 minutes were up, I kissed Emily's forehead. I'll be right outside if you need me. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, already drifting back to sleep from the pain medication. In the hallway, Sarah was waiting. How is she? She asked. She apologized, I said, still not quite believing it. She finally apologized. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, doctors' updates, and slow recovery. Emily's physical injuries healed faster than expected. The emotional injuries took longer. She asked to see me every day, sometimes just to sit in silence, sometimes to tell me more about the past 8 years, about the therapy that had reinforced her anger instead of healing it, about Mark's parents who'd made her feel ashamed of her middle-class roots, about the wedding planning where every decision had been about erasing her past. I wanted to be someone new, she told me on day 3, someone who didn't come from a small house with second-hand furniture, someone who belonged in Mark's world, and you represented everything I was trying to escape from. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you reminded me of who I really was. And who are you really? I asked gently. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. I'm your daughter, Margaret's daughter. I'm the girl who grew up fishing on Sunday mornings and eating spaghetti dinners at a kitchen table that wobbled. I'm the girl whose dad worked double shifts to send her to college, and I'm ashamed that I ever tried to be anyone else. Mark came to visit that afternoon, and I could see the tension between them. We need to talk, Emily told him, about a lot of things. About your parents, about the way I let them treat my dad, about building our marriage on lies. Mark nodded slowly. I know. I've been thinking about that too, about how I never questioned your story, how I just accepted that your father was the bad guy without ever meeting him. He's not the bad guy, Emily said firmly. He never was. And if we're going to make this marriage work, you need to know the real story, not the version I told you. The truth. Over the next hour, Emily told Mark everything. About Margaret's stubbornness, about my desperate attempts to get her to see a doctor, about the calendar that Emily had misread through the lens of grief, about 8 years of misdirected rage that had cost us both so much. Mark listened without interrupting. When Emily finished, he looked at me with something like horror. "Mr. Patterson, I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies. For the wedding, for my parents' behavior, for never questioning what Emily told me. I should have known better. I should have given you a chance." I nodded, accepting his apology, because what else could I do? He was my son-in-law now, whether I liked it or not. "My parents aren't going to like this," Mark said quietly. "They've invested a lot in the idea that Emily's old life was beneath her, that she was better off cutting ties with her past." Emily reached for his hand. "Then your parents are going to have to adjust, because my dad is part of my life now, and if they can't accept that, if they can't treat him with respect, then we'll see less of them." I saw Mark's face go pale. Standing up to his parents clearly wasn't something he'd done often. But he nodded. "Okay, if that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." It was a small victory, but it felt huge. My daughter was choosing me. After 8 years of rejection, she was finally choosing me. Emily was released from the hospital a week later. Mark took her home to their apartment, but she called me every day. Short conversations at first, awkward and careful, like we were learning to talk to each other again. But gradually, they got longer. She asked about my life, about the house, about what I'd been doing for the past 8 years while she'd been gone. "I want to see the house again," she said one day. "Can I come visit? Just me, not Mark. I need to face it, to remember what I threw away." She came on a Sunday morning, the first Sunday we'd spent together since before Margaret died. She walked through every room slowly, touching the furniture, looking at the photos, crying quietly. "It's exactly the same," she said. "You didn't change anything." I shook my head. "I kept it the way it was because I kept hoping you'd come back, that you'd walk through that door and decide you missed it here, that you missed me." She hugged me then, hard and long, and whispered, "I always missed you, Dad. I just didn't let myself admit it." We had coffee on the back porch, the same porch where I'd taught her to tie her shoes when she was 4, where we'd watched fireworks every 4th of July, where Margaret had sat reading books on summer afternoons. "This is where I belong," Emily said. "Not in that sterile apartment downtown, not in Mark's parents' world. Here, with you, with our memories. You can belong in both places," I told her. "You can have the life you built with Mark and still be my daughter. They don't have to be mutually exclusive." She nodded, but I could see she was struggling with it, with reconciling the two versions of herself. The successful businesswoman married to money, and the small-town girl who'd grown up in a modest house with a working-class dad. Sarah and David came for dinner that night. Emily helped me cook, just like she'd done as a teenager. We made Margaret's famous lasagna, following the recipe card in her handwriting that I'd kept in the kitchen drawer all these years. It wasn't perfect. We burned the garlic bread, and the salad dressing was too salty. But it was real. It was family. It was home. "I told Mark I want us to move," Emily announced over dinner. "Not back here, but somewhere between here and the city. Somewhere that's ours, not his parents' idea of where we should live. He's not thrilled, but he agreed." It was another small victory, another step away from the life she'd been performing and toward the life she actually wanted. That night, after everyone left, Emily and I sat on the couch looking through old photo albums. Pictures of her as a baby, as a toddler, as a gangly teenager with braces. Pictures of Margaret, healthy and laughing. Pictures of the three of us together, a complete family, before cancer and death and grief had torn us apart. "I wasted so much time," Emily said, her voice thick with regret. 8 years I can never get back. 8 years of holidays and birthdays and Sunday dinners. 8 years of your life that I just threw away because I was too angry and too proud to see the truth. I put my arm around her. "We can't change the past, but we have the future, and I'm going to be here for all of it." She looked at me with those eyes that were so much like Margaret's. "Promise me something, Dad. Promise me that if I start to pull away again, if I let Mark's family or anyone else make me forget what matters, you'll fight for me. Don't let me go so easily next time." I promised, even though the request broke my heart, because it meant she knew herself well enough to know she might hurt me again. 3 months later, Emily and Mark moved into a house halfway between the city and my town. It wasn't as fancy as their apartment had been, but it had a yard and a front porch and room for Emily to plant a garden like the one Margaret had kept. They invited me over for dinner once a week. Sometimes Mark's parents came too, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. But Emily stood her ground. She made sure I was included. She made sure everyone knew I was her father, and I wasn't going anywhere. Mark's father eventually pulled me aside one night. "I misjudged you," he said stiffly. "Emily's told us the real story about her mother, about what you went through. I was wrong to treat you the way I did at the wedding." It wasn't a warm apology, but it was an apology. I accepted it with a nod, because holding grudges wasn't going to help anyone. Sarah had her baby in June, a little girl they named Margaret. Emily cried when she heard the name. She asked if she could be the godmother, and Sarah agreed. At the baptism, I held little Margaret and thought about my own Margaret, about how proud she would have been to see our daughter finally finding her way back home, back to the values we'd raised her with, back to family. Emily got pregnant the following year. When she told me, she cried, "I want to do this right, Dad. I want to raise my child the way you and Mom raised me, with love and sacrifice and real values, not the way Mark's parents think we should do it, with nannies and boarding schools and keeping up appearances. I want our child to know their grandfather, to grow up in both worlds, but be grounded in ours." The day my grandson was born, I was in the delivery room. Mark was there too, holding Emily's hand, but she reached for me with her other hand. "Dad, meet James," she said, introducing me to the red-faced, screaming bundle in her arms. "James Robert Patterson Miller, named after both his grandfathers, but your name comes first." I held my grandson and felt the circle complete. Life, death, life again. Generations continuing despite pain and loss and mistakes. Mark's parents came to visit the baby a week later. They brought expensive gifts and talked about trust funds and private schools. Emily listened politely, then said, "That's lovely, but James is going to grow up the way I did, in a regular school, with regular friends, learning the value of hard work and family. If you want to contribute to his college fund, that's wonderful, but he's not going to be raised as a symbol of wealth and status." I'd never been more proud of my daughter than I was in that moment. She'd finally figured out who she was, not the girl trying to escape her past, not the woman performing a role in someone else's story, just Emily, my Emily, Margaret's Emily, strong and flawed and real. 2 years after the wedding that broke my heart, Emily and I were sitting on my back porch on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee like we'd done when she was young. James was toddling around the yard, chasing butterflies. Mark was inside cooking breakfast. It was peaceful. It was right. It was what Margaret would have wanted. "Dad," Emily said quietly, "I need to tell you something. I'm writing a letter to my therapist, firing her. She did more harm than good, making me think you were toxic, that cutting you out was healthy. I should have seen it sooner. I should have questioned her instead of just accepting what she said. But I was so angry, and she gave me permission to stay angry. People make mistakes," I told her. "Even therapists, even daughters, even fathers. The important thing is recognizing them and doing better." She nodded, then handed me a piece of paper she'd been holding. "I wrote this. It's an apology, a real one. Not just sorry, but an acknowledgement of everything I did wrong. I wanted you to have it, to keep it. So you never forget that I know what I did to you." I read the letter. It was 3 pages long, detailing every way she'd hurt me, every moment she'd excluded me, every year of pain she'd caused. It was raw and honest and devastating. At the end, she'd written, "You deserved a daughter who loved you the way you loved her. I'm sorry it took me so long to become that daughter. I'm sorry for the years we lost. But I promise you, for however many years we have left, I will be the daughter you always deserved. I will make Mom proud. I will make you proud. I love you, Dad. I always did, even when I was too angry to admit it. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket. Thank you, I said, for this, for coming back, for giving me another chance to be your father. She leaned her head on my shoulder, like she'd done when she was little. You never stopped being my father, Dad, even when I pretended you didn't exist. You were always there, waiting, and that's what finally brought me back, knowing you'd never give up on me, even when I'd given up on you. That's my story. 8 years of rejection, one terrible wedding, and a car accident that finally broke through the wall my daughter had built between us. Was she right to blame me for her mother's death? No. Did I understand why she did it? After everything, yes. Grief makes us do terrible things sometimes. It makes us hurt the people who love us most, because they're the safest targets. They're the ones we know will take it, will forgive us, will still be there when we finally come to our senses. Would you have done the same thing I did? Would you have kept showing up, kept loving someone who treated you like you were invisible? Or would you have walked away, protected yourself, decided that enough was enough? I don't know if I made the right choice. Some days, I think I should have set harder boundaries. Other days, I'm just grateful that my stubbornness gave Emily something solid to come back to when she was ready. What I do know is this: family is complicated. Love is complicated. Forgiveness is complicated. There are no perfect answers. No clear rules about when to hold on and when to let go. You just do the best you can with the information you have, and hope that love is enough to bridge the gaps that pain creates. My daughter and I will never get back those 8 years, but we have today. We have Sunday mornings on the porch, and weekly dinners, and a grandson who will grow up knowing both his grandfathers. We have a relationship built on honesty now, not on the fantasy of a perfect family. And maybe that's better. Maybe that's stronger. Maybe that's what real love actually looks like. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to an old man's story. Drop a comment below telling me what you think. Would you have forgiven Emily? Would you have kept fighting for the relationship? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories to share. Stories about life and family, and the messy, beautiful, painful things that make us human. Until next time, take care of the people you love, even when they make it hard, especially when they make it hard.